Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Pereira versus Ankalaev fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So this is the contest in which is the most important one in the light heavyweight division, to be completely honest, and the only fight in the light heavyweight division that makes sense left for Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira has been accused of ducking that of Ankalaev, and instead took a contest versus Khalil Roundtree, which was a surprising fight to see. But we now have this contest finally versus Ankalaev. Ankalaev is seen as the only guy who realistically can offer something a bit different, that being the wrestling side of things, that can trouble Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira has shown that he is human on multiple occasions. He's shown that, he can be hurt, he can be troubled at times, and he isn't perfect, but he is arguably the face of the UFC at the moment and is, an excellent star in the UFC. And so, before we kind of talk too much about the main event, I want to talk about the whole card. And this is UFC 313. This is coming off UFC 312, which was, not the best of events, I can't lie. I mean, Zhang looked very good in her performance versus Tatiana Suarez. That was a very good fight for herself. And Duplessis looked convincing versus Sean Strickland. It wasn't one of the cards or shows in which, had a stacked undercard. The undercard was quite poor, to be completely honest. And, this one's a slight bit better, but it still isn't anything too crazy. It's not a great card, not the best of shows. I mean, it did have Gaethje versus Hooker on, which I'll touch upon in a minute, which would have been an excellent fight to have as an undercard fight. Now, I feel like, maybe there is a little bit of a down step in the Kona main event. And then, like I say, it's not got a crazily good undercard either. And saying that, the UFC seemingly set the bar quite high with their first pay-per-view of the year being the, Islam Makhachev versus what was meant to be Sarukian show. That was a very good pay-per-view, and just since then it seems like they have dropped off a bit, and I feel like the fight nights have maybe been that bit better. I mean, obviously we had Cejudo versus Yadong, which was meant to be a stacked fight night, and unfortunately there were 6 fights in which didn't end up happening on that show, but it was still, meant to be on paper a very good fight night, and, the Manuel Karp versus Almabayev one wasn't anything crazy because of the change of opponents, and, there is the Roundtree versus Jamal Hill, which is, as a fight night, is going to be an excellent fight night. And so, there definitely maybe has been arguably some better fight nights than that of actual pay-per-view cards, which is a shame, to be completely honest. And I feel like with this card, Alex Pereira is heavily carrying the card, to be completely honest. And, he is, like I say, one of the stars, if not the main kind of star draw in the UFC at the moment, bar maybe like a John Jones. And, McGregor, of course, isn't fighting at the moment. So, he's kind of doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And, is the fans going to just buy a pay-per-view just to kind of watch Alex Pereira? I'm not entirely sure. It's going to be kind of a real test, and I would be very interested to see the whole numbers side of things and to see how well it does, because, like I say, I'm just not entirely sure if the pay-per-view is up to the standard in which, the UFC fans want and that they're willing to pay for, because it is still very expensive to buy a pay-per-view in America. And, this definitely is a show which maybe should be a bit cheaper. I don't know. Like I say, the UFC always ends up delivering with big fights and very good fights, but they're just not always the biggest of names. And so, I feel like there is a huge show there to be made in Brazil, which I feel like would sell amazingly with Alex Pereira, with, maybe Jose Aldo having his few last fights, with, the fighting nerds, Baralho. There is some great fights there to be made from Brazilian fighters, and I feel like why haven't the UFC kind of tapped more into that market with Alex Pereira? And I just feel like that maybe could have sold this fight that little bit better, and maybe could have made a better undercard as a result if this was in Brazil. But nonetheless, we'll talk about some of the fights on the undercard. Like I say, it's not a bad undercard. There is some still good names, notable names on it. I mean, we have Blades versus Kuniev, which is surprisingly low down on the card, to be completely honest. And this fight was cancelled, taken off the fight night of Cejudo versus Yadong, and that was quite low down on that. And then, it was rescheduled again. So it clearly is the case that the UFC are keen to have this matchup happen, which is it's just very strange. I feel like the UFC are desperately trying to make the heavyweight division, which I've touched upon a few times now, kind of noticeable again, and bringing a Dana White contender series fighter straight into a tough top contender fighter versus Curtis Blades, who wasn't that long ago fighting Tom Aspinall. It's just an interesting contest to see. It shows that they are moving fighters very quickly along in just the hopes of having a new star in the heavyweight division come through. If Kuniev beats Blades, then it's a whole different story. To be completely honest, then we do have, of course, that new kind of star coming through. Them new tests. A new test there ready waiting. But if Blades wins again, then it just showcases that the heavyweight division really doesn't have much depth, isn't really that interesting, to be completely honest, bar of course Aspinall versus Jones or Jones versus Ngannou, if that ever does happen. And so yeah, it's just interesting to see. Of course, like I say, very low down on the card, and I mean, I'm going to be interested to see how it plays out. But it's just a strange fight. King Green is back on the card again as well against Rufi. It's an interesting fight, I suppose, to an extent. I mean, King Green looked and got beaten down versus Paddy the Baddy, and wasn't able to have any kind of level of success. And he's gone out the rankings as a result. And I don't really realistically think there's too much left for him to give in his career. But he could prove me wrong with a good performance and a good contest there. And then this one, Turner versus Bahamondes, I think has the capabilities to be an excellent lightweight fight, but I have a feeling, at the time of recording this fight is still there, ready, waiting to go ahead. But there has been some rumours floating around that Jalen Turner may be out of the fight. That isn't anything I've been able to confirm, and I can't say too much from. It's just rumours from what I've heard speculating around that Turner may be out of this fight. I may be wrong. Hopefully, I'll be wrong because, like I said, I do feel like this has the capabilities to be a very good fight, and I feel like Jalen Turner can progress on the lightweight division, and I would like to see him, win this fight and then maybe get a good top contest. But obviously we'll have to wait and see if he's even able to compete in this show just yet. But like I say, that's the kind of names on the undercard which are noticeable names realistically. And now we'll speak about the co-main event, which is still a great fight. But of course, it's not what everybody was wanting. Of course, it's Gaethje versus Fiziev, the rematch. But it was meant to be Gaethje versus Hooker, and as a fan of the UFC and as a fan of just watching pure violence, the first fight versus Gaethje and Fiziev was an excellent fight, and that was a lot of pure violence. And pretty much every time that you see Gaethje fight, it will be that much violent. But just Gaethje versus Hooker had the makings to be an excellent fight, and hopefully it will still happen. Gaethje kind of has to beat Fiziev now, and it's going to be a tough test for him to be able to win because I know Fiziev is coming in on very short notice, but he made it difficult work for Gaethje last time in their fight, and he is a tough night's work for anybody. And I feel like he isn't going to be somebody who's going to be going out of shape too much in between camps. And I feel like he definitely was ready, but he could be catching a Gaethje who is vulnerable. That's what everybody's kind of thinking and interested in seeing from a Justin Gaethje. I mean, I give Gaethje full credit for wanting to fight Hooker after the contest in which he had versus Max Holloway. I mean, the whole fight was an entertaining fight. He was losing the fight and he was getting beaten up relatively badly in the fight, but of course, the devastating moments in which the UFC have decided to kind of release a new angle of where you can see just how bad it is for Justin Gaethje, which is a bit crazy to think that they've just kind of released that footage on the week of him fighting. I'm sure that's not going to be nice for him to watch over again because that's probably going to bring back some demons. But like I say, I had to respect Gaethje for being willing to fight Hooker, who was such a brawler, was similarly to himself always going to be able to really dig deep and really just put it all on the line and not care too much and want to put on a violent showing, and is on a good kind of run of form at the moment. And so obviously that fell through. Hopefully it will happen if Gaethje beats Fiziev, like I've said. But, I give also Fiziev full credit for stepping up on short notice. I mean, there was a lot of people that were kind of talking about fighting Gaethje when the fight got cancelled versus Hooker. I mean, Sarukian was very keen to go at Hooker and kind of slag him off and everything like that, but didn't seem to actually want the fight versus Gaethje, and that could have been a perfect way for Sarukian to get back in Dana White's good books, of course, after all that happened with him meaning to fight Islam Makhachev and then that not coming and that not happening. He could have easily been able to get back in, like I say, Dana White's good books if he'd have fought Gaethje and won. Obviously, that isn't happening. Dustin Poirier said that he went and willingly, put his name in the hat straight away, and Poirier has said that he only wants kind of legends to fight, and he'd already fought Gaethje once, he'd lost, he got knocked out. That could have happened again, and I would have been completely here for that to happen again. Other people, Moicano said he would be willing to do it. There was quite a few different names floating around, but Fiziev was the one who was willing to do it. I mean, quite often, more often than not, you'll hear a lot of fighters, when a fighter pulls out on short notice, put their name in a hat, say that they're willing to fight, but then, you know, they get the call maybe and it just doesn't happen, and they just say maybe they're not quite ready is what they're saying, or maybe they're just doing it, maybe they're just talking, maybe they don't actually mean it. you know Not many fighters are willing to come in on short notice and really save the day with shows, and that's why Fiziev should be rewarded even if he loses, because of the fact that he is saving the show, to be completely honest. Because if Gaethje didn't fight on the show versus Hooker, or if he didn't fight in the show in general, then like I've touched upon, the show is very weak. And by the rumours of Turner pulling out as well, if he was to pull out as well, then the show would be a tiny pay per view, and nobody would realistically want to buy it. And so Fiziev has realistically really come and saved the day. Like I say, the first fight was a very good contest, and it of course is going to be interesting to see how Gaethje is able to deal with coming into this contest, off the back of the Max Holloway fight. Obviously, he's had a bit of time to, recover. I believe it was about a year now, if not just a bit less than that, where it was the UFC 300, and of course everything went down with him. So he's had a bit of time to recover, which I'm a fan of, and which, I feel like every fighter who takes a big defeat really needs to have that time. So to now see him back, is his chin going to be the same? I mean, when he fought Fiziev the first time, his chin was noticeably, very strong, and he could take a shot very well, and he was known to be able to take a shot very well. But obviously, like I touched upon, things have changed, and so will he be the same guy? I'm not too sure. I think that Gaethje is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I don't feel like he's going to get stopped. I feel like he could get hurt versus Fiziev in the first few rounds. I could see Fiziev coming on quickly, as he normally does at the start of fights, as he did in the first fight between the two of them, and putting on some good, strong shots early on with utilising his speed. But I feel like Gaethje will grow into the fight, and the longer it goes on, I feel like he'll come back in with confidence again. I feel like he can still take a shot. I would like to hope that he can, and I feel like he will, be able to mass this aggressive kind of all or nothing type style again and be able to tire down Fiziev. I believe that this is a 5 round contest, which is seemingly the case for all pay-per-view events co-mains at the moment, which is something I love to see. And I think the 5 rounds for this fight will go into Gaethje's favour. I think Fiziev was definitely slowing down in the first contest between the two of them. I feel like Gaethje can continue to fight throughout the fight, and he may be looking sloppy defensively, looking quite messy, but if he doesn't get caught with a devastating shot and he doesn't try and stand in the centre of the cage, I mean, he might just let his ego get the better of him and just point to the centre of the cage and try and get his own back and do what Max Holloway did to him. If he doesn't do that, then I feel like he can win by unanimous decision, possibly a late stoppage in the 5th round, but like I say, I feel like he can win by unanimous decision and then reinstate himself in the lightweight division, showcase that he is still around there, and showcase that he is still a name that's noticeable and should be, respected by the other guys in the division, because I feel like the loss, because of how viral it went and because of how big of a moment it was in the UFC, I feel like that really lost a lot of respect upon Gaethje's name, in which he really shouldn't have lost, because he is an excellent fighter and still deserves all the credit for what he has done in his career. But I still believe he can still be in the top of the lightweight division. I feel like it's definitely an interesting time in that division, because there's lots of matchups that have already kind of happened, and so there's not, loads of kind of new blood left for Makachev. Of course, the Pereira is now coming into it. Sarukian, of course, is floating around. What's going to happen with him next? It's not going to be a title shot, so who he could face could be interesting. So there are still matchups there available to be made for something like a Gaethje, so we will have to wait and see what might happen next for him, of course, if he beats Fiziev. But now to move back onto the main event, of course, Pereira versus Ankalaev. Pereira coming into this fight, I feel like he has been forced into this fight, to be completely honest. I was hearing, again, just hearing speculation, rumours, that this fight was actually going to happen next for Pereira. And, I don't know if that was any fault of his own, if he didn't really want the fight, if he was being difficult to work with, I'm not entirely sure. But it did seem like that he didn't really want or didn't really care too much for the fight. When I said my kind of wants for 10 fights that I want in the UFC for 2025, I said that this was a matchup in which had to happen. Of course, everybody believes it has to happen in the light heavyweight division. There isn't really any other matchups that are better and, should happen instead. This one has to happen. He, obviously had a fight versus, Roundtree. He won via TKO in round 4. It was a fight where he did have problems, and I feel like he was maybe overlooking Roundtree, and maybe made it more difficult for himself than he could have. But Roundtree looked good. He looked, he looked strong. He looked like he could hurt Pereira, and he did hurt Pereira. I feel like Pereira has been shown, like I say, on multiple occasions, that he is still human. Obviously, when he lost to Adesanya, he lost badly. He got knocked out. He showcased that he was still human. And, before that, he was on an excellent run, looking very scary and looking like he could destroy everybody. He then was able to rebuild that run, destroying everybody again in the light heavyweight division. But that Roundtree fight, again, has shown that he is human. And I feel like this kind of, stone face killer that we were kind of used to from Alex Pereira has kind of gone as well. I mean, he seems to definitely be showcasing a bit of a less scary persona, and I feel like he is perhaps being a bit more chilled in what he's doing and, just enjoying himself a bit more. I think he may be going into camps a bit more chill, which definitely could play as a bad thing. I think he's been very dominant as a fighter in the light heavyweight division, of course, so far, and he's definitely riding the high of everything. But I do believe that maybe he may be starting to take his foot off the gas a little bit, and maybe just trying to, enjoy himself that bit more, which I don't blame him for at all, but it may come back to bite him. And, I don't think he can be anywhere near as active as what he was realistically last year. I don't think he can step in on short notice and save shows and save cards like he was doing last year. But you never know. I mean, he was kind of unfairly maybe robbed to an extent. I mean, there was the discussion of, was he fighter of the year? Was Pereira fighter of the year? It was a discussion. I thought that Pereira kind of was fighter of the year. I thought he just, all that he did to save the UFC was just so vital, and the moments that he had were just so viral. He deserved to be fighter of the year, in my opinion. Obviously people had it one way, people had it another way, but still, can he do it again? I'm not entirely sure. I feel like he may only have 2 fights this year, which would still, be great to see, but, we'll have to wait and see. And, the other kind of debate floating around with him is, first of all, is he the face of the UFC? Maybe, possibly, yes, because he is getting all these viral moments. Even though he doesn't speak English, he's still, being able to entertain the fans and put on a show and look good and, create a big fan base. But at the same time, of course, the other debate is there with, is he pound for pound number one? If he beats Ankalaev, is he pound for pound number one? I mean, he was for a bit. Now John Jones is, getting back involved again. Then, Makhachev, of course, is number one at the moment. Makhachev has just beat Moicano. Of course, it wasn't the fight that he wanted. It's not as creditable as a name to beat. But Pereira, if he beats Ankalaev, the top number one contender, does that put him back as the clear number one pound for pound in the UFC, because he's beaten pretty much every single noticeable name in the light heavyweight division. Bar maybe a couple coming up, but that just aren't quite there yet. Anyone around, he's beaten. I mean, Jamal Hill, Jerry Prohaska, uh, Blachowicz, Roundtree, again, just a list of names which is excellent there to who he has beaten in just a short time. And Ankalaev, if he beats him as well, that's five of the best in the light heavyweight division in just such a short time. Like I say, the speed in which he's done it is excellent. Does that make him pound for pound number one? Maybe. The debate has to be there, and he probably will get put into the pound for pound number one ranking, because that position from the UFC kind of rankings are and is moving around quite a lot. And so, will he be pound for pound number one if he does beat Ankalaev? You would probably have to argue yes, to an extent. To speak a bit more about, Ankalaev and, of course, the threat in which he is seen as the wrestling threat. That's something in which Pereira has shown weakness to in the past. I mean, when he fought Adesanya took him down and had success on the ground, kind of just holding him there. And Adesanya isn't really a great wrestler. He's not really known for taking guys to the ground, and in his recent fights, he's not really been able to do that at all. And he was able to have a lot of success there and just keep Pereira there. Ankalaev probably will try and go for the takedowns. He isn't really known for doing it often though, and so it's definitely going to be interesting. Will he up it? Will he try and do it more because he sees Pereira as, the person that you have to do that to? Maybe that'd be the smart game plan, I'm not entirely sure. When he fought Rakic, obviously he won last time by unanimous decision there, but he didn't go for any takedowns at all. And it was surprising to see, because of the whole talk around him fighting Pereira, the wrestling threat. You would expect him to at least do it once, at least try, just to get the fans, excited for that aspect of the wrestling threat. Now that hype has kind of died down a little bit, and I think his momentum and hype has slowed down as a result of, not a bad performance versus Rakic at all, but a performance in which he didn't showcase what the fans wanted to see. And it isn't, making him come into this fight as scary, as much of a threat as what he could have been seen as if he did take Rekic down. He did have a lot of success on the ground. He is a bit of a kickboxer himself, Ankalaev. I mean, this could be argued to be a kickboxer versus kickboxer fight, to be completely honest. And Pereira has shown he can win them contests, and he can, have success against fellow kickboxers. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to see. He doesn't wrestle loads. When he gets you up against the cage, he can wrestle a lot. If he does try and go for takedowns, Pereira has kind of used the sneaky card in which Khalil Roundtree tried to use versus him, which was, the I've got something up my sleeve, there's something I've got as a game plan which the opponent won't expect if they go and try and do this thing. If Ankalaev tries to go for a takedown, does he actually have something up his sleeve? I'm not entirely sure. If Ankalaev does get him to the ground, he might be able to have success. It's going to be interesting to see. I think, though, that Dana White doesn't really want him as a champion, to be completely honest. I mean, Dana White has kind of made it quite evident that he hasn't always wanted certain fighters to become champion. I mean, he made it very hard for Merab Dvalishvili to be able to get the opportunity to fight for the title. He made it very difficult for Bilal Muhammad to be able to get the opportunity to fight for the title. Two wrestlers who on paper may not have the most entertaining of styles, he wasn't so keen to put them as a fast track into a title shot, unlike other fighters like that of an Alex Pereira, who is a bit more of a knockout artist, who is going to be more entertaining, who was pushed very quickly, who also has a storyline, of course, with Adesanya, pushed very quickly to a title shot. It's just interesting to see. Ankalaev has had to wait for his opportunity to get a title shot. Does Dana White really want him as a champion? Probably not, because Pereira, if he loses, he probably will just move up to heavyweight. But still, it means the light heavyweight division has got a name in which, is a very talented and skilled fighter, but isn't going to sell the same way in which Alex Pereira sells. So it's just very interesting to see, and it's going to be difficult for Ankalaev. He is fighting during Ramadan. He has said that that is an advantage for him. Maybe that is an advantage for him. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not going to go into it too much, but fighting during Ramadan, you would expect to be a very difficult thing to do. A lot of fighters have come out and said that it's a very difficult, tough thing to be able to do. And so, full credit for Ankalaev for being willing to take one of the toughest fights, if not the toughest fight of his career during Ramadan. It shows that he's just very willing to take the opportunity. And, as well, Pereira put out that kind of bet with Ankalaev saying that I think it was like 200 grand or 250 grand, I'm not entirely sure, to the winner's charity of choice. Ankalaev, then rejected it, said that he doesn't bet due to his religion, says that he has a lot of his purse that goes to charity anyway. I respect that a lot, but yeah, Alex Pereira doing stuff like that, maybe it's trying to get in the head of Ankalaev. He probably would have expected Ankalaev to reject the bid. This is the type of stuff that Conor McGregor has done in the past. Making bids, not making bids, making bets with the opponents. This is what Jake Paul's done in the past, trying to make bets with the opponents to try and get under their skin, maybe to try and disrupt what their mindset is. I'm not entirely sure, and I just doubt it really did much for Ankalaev. But it was just interesting to see Pereira coming with that confidence to put all his cards on the table. To speak about Pereira, as a fighter though, he closes the distance very well, and he does it quite sneakily. I mean, his footwork is always kind of edging closer towards you and being able to just kind of find his range, this perfect range, in which he is typically very good to, very good at, and he showed that well, of course, versus Jamal Hill, where he was able to just, sneakily get his foot that one step closer when the ref called for that timeout to then be able to land a big shot. He is always creeping forwards, but you have to always be aware. He is very sneaky, and of course he has the very sneaky leg shots in which has brutalised many of the opponents in which he's faced. I mean, of course, Adesanya, going back to their fights, Adesanya has been very vocal in saying that the sneaky leg kicks of Pereira are very, very difficult to deal with, and they're very, very hard. You've seen them videos online going viral of him just kind of effortlessly going and kicking people's legs and bruising them with ease. It's sneaky, very strong leg kicks. Of course, he has the crazy power in general. I mean, whether that's the huge left hook in which he often throws the short, strong left hook that seems to generate destructive levels of power, or is that the big strong jab in which always is able to have success, and that's where he was able to beat up Roundtree quite a lot, or the big head kick in which knocked out Jiri Prochazka. There's very different ways in which he does land this crazy power. It seems like a lot of different shots that he throws can just land big power. He's accurate in his work. He's always throwing with intent. He's able to control the centre very well. I feel like Ankalaev can do that and is typically quite used to controlling the centre as well. Rakic went right into the back foot straight away when they fought, so who will be able to control the centre for this fight? That will be interesting to see. He's got that fear factor about him, of course. A lot of opponents will fear him as a guy, he's been made to look human, but he's still a very scary kind of figure, and he has them intense face downs in which he always kind of goes with before the fights. Will he strike any fear onto Ankalaev? I doubt it, but he still has that there. His short shots are excellent, and like I say, he generates crazy amounts of power, which doesn't really make too much human sense. He's got, like I say, a very strong jab. He can deal with a fast-paced tempo, and like I say, he just maybe relies a bit too much on his power, but just trusts that his power can do a lot of damage, even if the tempo's high, even if he is getting outthrown. He punishes you when you're on the cage. If he can back you up onto the cage. Ankalaev was getting turned very well by Rakic on multiple occasions, even when Rakic was tired and not really doing too much at the end of the fight. He was still able to turn Ankalaev. So if Ankalaev does get Pereira up against the cage, if Pereira can turn him round, then Pereira has his open kind of avenue there to have success. And he does force you back as well. Like I say, he is very good at controlling the centre. Negatives about him, of course, he does stand very tall. I feel like he has minimal defensive movement, and he can kind of just spring out of the way a bit at times, and doesn't really have much head movement either. He can be taken and can be held down, like shown by Adesanya all them kind of fights ago now. He stays in range far too long. He's a very big target there to be hit. He doesn't really land too many counters. Sometimes he'll try and throw a counter, but in general, for the most part, he won't really throw or land too many. He can lunge in when he is trying to jab to the body. He is flat-footed. He doesn't fight that well on the back foot, I don't believe. He doesn't go for takedowns at all. He has minimal outputs quite often at times, but I don't feel like Ankalaev has crazily high levels of output either. But that's where I feel like Roundtree had the most amount of success with the kind of larger amount of output that he was throwing. He can lean back, and if he does miss, then he can be made to pay. You know, he missed, did a spin and got caught versus Roundtree. So if he does miss, he can be there, like I say, the big target there to be hit. Ankalaev as a fighter, he's definitely faster out of the two of them, and that's definitely going to play a factor, I believe. You know, he has his own sneaky shots, but his sneaky shot is a sneaky kind of left going straight through. That might push Pereira back because it's explosive. He's definitely the more explosive out of the two, and that will be interesting, you know, punching through the guard of that of Pereira. If he can land a couple of them, they are strong shots. Not saying that it would be able to knock him out as a result of that, but it may put him onto the back foot. That could be interesting to see. He's definitely the, you know, better defensive, you know, movement wise. I still don't think he's that comfortable on the back foot still though. He is lighter on his feet. I think he feints better, feints well. I think he cuts off the cage quite well as well. So he may be able to, you know, issue takedowns if he is able to cut off the cage well. If he does get Pereira onto the back foot, he is typically come forwards, got a come forward style. He is accurate, and he is an accurate kind of switch stancer in his fight versus Rakic. He classed himself as an orthodox fighter, but he is a switch stancer, if not more so of a southpaw, and so that can definitely be tricky to deal with. He is able to react and to reset quite well from shots and do that better than that of Pereira. You know, get back to the centre of the ring well. He is defensively smarter. His kicking variety is good, and you know, was on showcase versus Rakic. I feel like he's very controlled, and I do believe he does improve throughout, and of course gaining confidence. So if Pereira allows him to get into the later rounds, like he did versus Roundtree, I feel like he's only going to improve. You know, can he deal with still getting beaten down and, you know, mushed up as much as what Roundtree did? I'm not entirely sure, but I still feel like he can improve throughout the fight. Negatives about him, I feel like he does catch far too many shots. Rakic was throwing head kicks, he was throwing body kicks, and continuously Ankalaev was just catching them shots. You don't want to be catching them shots from Alex Pereira. I don't care if your guard is up there. You're going to get hurt as a result of just catching them shots. And so that's not something I want to be seeing from him. He doesn't always throw his shots with too much intent, and it's a lot of the time just singular shots that he is throwing, so that might not, you know, it might deter Pereira for a little bit, but I don't feel like it will fully put Pereira off coming forwards. He doesn't use his takedowns like I've touched upon enough. I don't feel like he can get in range typically that well. I feel like he can wait a bit too long and, you know, struggle to find his range when he goes for counters as well. He can be hurt to the legs. Blachowicz, the kind of opponent that both of these fighters have struggled with, was able to really kind of hurt Ankalaev's legs throughout a lot of the fight. And if Blachowicz is hurting Ankalaev with leg kicks, if Pereira gets his leg kicks going, then he can have a lot of success. And you know, that's just not a good recipe for Ankalaev. He can be outthrown, he can be a slow starter. Don't think Pereira is that quick of a starter, but he can just land instantly, so he can still hurt from the get-go. He, you know, doesn't land the attempted counters that he throws. He doesn't get the respect of his opponents too much. I feel like he, like I say, throws in singular shots, and he doesn't throw too much when he even is in close. If he is in the clinch, I don't think he is throwing too much. Pereira is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Pereira is going to be able to win via KO in round 3. TKO, KO, I think he can really hurt him. I feel like the leg kick's going to punish him. I feel like Ankalaev is going to kind of go for sloppy takedowns, and Pereira is it probably going to be able to see that coming. And I would like to see that Pereira can deal with the takedowns a bit better and even just push Ankalaev off, because I feel like Ankalaev, when he starts getting hurt with leg kicks and, you know, even punches, he will just, like say, forcefully go for takedowns and just not really set them off up very well, or, you know, not try and catch Pereira out with them. Just be quite predictable when he's going to throw one and go for one. And I feel like Pereira is going to be able to inevitably wear him down, hurt him. After maybe, Ankalaev might have a bit of success in the first round, but like I say, with the leg kicks, with the singular shots, with the lack of being able to get in range, I feel like Pereira has a recipe there to be able to win via knockout in round 3. Again, a huge statement victory for himself. The last big name realistically in the light heavyweight division that he can really beat. I mean, he can fight the winner of Allberg versus Blachowicz next. That could be a good contest, and I would be willing to see the winner of that fight Pereira. But you know, Blachowicz had a good fight versus Pereira, so that could happen again. Allberg is a good fighter coming through, but I just don't realistically see that either of them would have a be able to beat Pereira. I'm not entirely sure. So, I wouldn't blame him. A lot of fighters right now are moving up in weight and, change and just talking about changing weight classes without really going through the division, beating all the guys. Pereira has been able to do that, and so he has full right to go up into the heavyweight division. It's been talked about a little bit. It's kind of gone down the talks about it a little bit at the moment, but he still could go up into the heavyweight division. That talk might reopen if he beats Ankalaev, so he still could fight Aspinall. That Aspinall is still meant to be fighting Jones, but then also that's gone very quiet as well. There's been no kind of discussions from Jones' side. I don't necessarily know what's going on with that. It's sad to see that it's gone quiet. So maybe Pereira could slide into the heavyweight division and get a contest versus Aspinall. If not, maybe he would welcome up Duplessis, who has also said that he's willing to accept, and go up into the light heavyweight division, but Pereira's also said that he'd be willing to go down into the middleweight division, which would be crazy to be completely honest, because Pereira struggled to realistically make light heavyweights and comes in so heavy in them fights. For him to be middleweight would be crazy to be able to do that again, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe a Duplessis fight could happen, but I feel like only realistically big fights should be happening now for Alex Pereira because, of course, he is arguably the face of the UFC. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you have enjoyed. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.